Alright guys, we're going to talk about lists a little bit more. Actually, we're going to talk about strings again. A couple of reasons why. One is I just want to familiarize you with the idea of extracting pieces of data from a string. And we did that in the star buzz. We looked for a dollar sign, and then we got the next 4 digits in order to display a price. And we did that with the .find method. A method is a function that's attached to a data element. So just in the shell, I'm going to do this. S is equal to hello there. Then I'm going to do s.find, and I want to find a lowercase e. And it found it at position 1, which is what we expect. What if our data looked like this? We've seen HTML now. It kind of looks like this. I don't want to make this too complicated. Alright, here's what I typed, and I should probably put it in a program so that if we make mistakes, I'm going to space it out to try to make it easier to see. Okay, so S is equal to double quote, angle brace, image source equals single quote, file name.jpg, another single quote, a close angle brace, and you know what, we're probably going to wind up making corrections to this, so just copy that line, highlight it all, choose edit copy, and let's put that inside a file. And we're going to call this one parser because we're extracting pieces out of the text. Parsing is when you analyze something and you get the individual pieces out of it. So parser, P-A-R-S-E-R.py. Okay, so here's what I want. My program is really curious about the path to this file name. But the first thing it's curious about is what HTML tag it is, because it could be, now don't necessarily type this, but it could have been a different tag. It could have been something like this. Like I said, don't type this. It could have been a hypertext link, which is known as an ahref, like that. Or it could have been a paragraph tag. Or it could have been a tag for making things bold, which is B. Or making things like a huge header, H1. So you get the idea. The thing after the angle brace is the tag. But once I know what the tag is, I need to figure out how to get the data out. And in this case, what am I going to look for? I want to get that file out of it, so what do I need to know? I need to know the position of what?
The file name.
Yeah, I need to know the file name, so what can I search for in this string?
Search file name.jpg.
I could do that, but what if it was called something else? What if somebody decided to send me file name.png or, you know, or portrait, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So we got to look for something that indicates the beginning of the file name. And in that case, it's that quote. So I'm going to look for that quote. Firstly, I'm just going to print, just to help me. Print s.find, send, find, a single quote. How do you type in a single quote? Well, use a double quote and then put a single quote and then a double quote again. That looks really silly, sorry. But it's a double quote followed by a single quote followed by a double quote with no spaces. Let's just make sure that this statement doesn't give a syntax error. Built-in function has no attribute find. Oh, because it's supposed to be s.find, not print.find. Sorry. Okay, it found it at position 12. Let's print the data as well. So in front of s.find, just print s, comma, and then s.find. We're just making sure we get all of our syntax right. Okay, so is that really at position 12? Well, let's count. That's position 0, because I have a space in front of it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yours may be different depending on how you spaced it. You may have taken that space out. You may have taken, these spaces out.
Yeah.
So now when I run it, it says 9. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so now I want to slice the string starting at that position. But what am I going to read out to? How do I know where the end of my file name is? And it's not the G because it might be a JPEG or something, It might be a PCX file or a TIFF or something. It may not have a G. So what am I going to look for that indicates the end of the file?
The other single
The
quotation.
closing quote, yeah. That kind of gives us a problem, though. How do we find the second quote? How do we say, okay, by the way, I wanted you to start past that one, because otherwise it's going to just find the first one every single time. Now, my thought is that I bet that Python string find accepts an optional parameter telling you where to start your search. And the reason for that is because if you can't specify a starting position in it, then it would just always find the first one. It's like if I wanted to find all the people named Eric. And so I walked around and I went, aha, here's Eric. And then later on I wanted to find the next person named Eric. Aha, here's Eric. And I kept doing that over and over again. You'd think I was an idiot. But if I think to myself, okay, I've checked the first 2 rows, this time I'm going to start searching on the 3rd row. Aha, here's Eric. Oh, you're not Eric. Sorry. Anyways, you get the idea. So the find function features an optional starting point where we can say we want to go one past where we were before. So really we ought to start keeping track of these things. I'm going to make a variable called OQ for open quote, and I'm going to set it equal to s.find, and I'm going to look for that single quote. And then I'm going to print s, comma, OQ. That way I have this variable and I can use it to help me find the close quote. There we go. It found it at position 9 on my data. Yours may be different. So now when I start searching, I want to start at that position. So let's make another variable called close quote. CQ is equal to s.find that quote symbol, starting with where we found the last one. Now this is wrong actually, but we can run it and see why. But can you predict what's wrong with this? Well, if I say start counting at row 2 and Eric's in row 2, I'm just going to find Eric again. So the second time it prints something, I don't know why I put that double. Yeah. So the second time I print something, when I print CQ now, it's just going to print 9 again. How do I fix that? How do I stop it from finding the same one over and over again? If this is where I'm supposed to start searching, how do I skip that quote? If I found Eric on row 2 and then I knew I was done with row 2, the next time I looked for Eric, which row would I begin on? Did I hear it? 3. Yeah, so I have to add one to OQ in order to start looking on row 3. There we go. We found one quote on 9, and we found the second quote on 22. We can use those two numbers to take a slice. You remember what slicing is? Slicing is when I take a string and I specify a starting and a stop position. Don't type this, but like if I typed 10:20, it would get the string starting at position 10 and then going out 10 more spaces. What do I mean by that? Well, 20 minus 10 is 10, so it would count out 10 places. Or if I did this, 10, 15, it would start out at 10 and then go 5 more places. So I'm going to start off at the open quote, and I'm going to end at the close quote. But I need to store that in a variable. So I'm going to make a variable name called fn for file name. File name is equal to s, and then I take a slice of s. Now let's print it out, see if we got it right. It's not going to be quite right, but it's okay. This is often a way you program. You add a little bit of code, you run it, you adjust it, you modify it, because you want to get each part right before you go on next. I wasn't expecting that.
These must be integers.
Are they not? Okay. Well then, I'm going to print the type of CQ. It's telling me that the indexes have to be integers. I thought CQ was an integer. It's telling me it's not, so I want to find out what type of data it is, so I'm using the word type, the function called type. Well, it isn't it. Oh, excuse me, the syntax is not comma, it's colon. Get rid of that print type line, but put a colon between those two things. There we go, file name .png. Now it could be that I don't want quotes in it. What should I do to get it to skip that opening quote? When I take my slice, what position should I actually start at?
10.
I don't want to start, I don't want to start at opening quote position. I want to start one past it. So there we go. We had this HTML tag, and from it we extracted the important piece of information, which is the file name of the image that it's pointing to. The rest of this stuff is just temporary stuff. You know, that 22 and that 9, we could delete that. If you have this working, though, mess up your data by removing one or the other quotes. You're going to need to go back in, but remove one of those apostrophes. And don't tell me it worked.
Oh, I see what it did.
I see why it worked, and I'm surprised. Okay, that was my mistake. Okay, as well, to get that to work, add something to the end of your beginning string. I don't know what else, just a paragraph tag. So after image source is equal to file name, tack on one more tag. And we're doing this just to try to get an error or some bad output when I've removed that quote. See, I had an apostrophe there after PNG, but it's not there anymore. So when I run it, it no longer gets the correct tag. What if there weren't any apostrophes? Well, you know, the cute saying is garbage in, garbage out. Where when you look for things and they don't exist, we're going to get bad input, bad output. Here we go. This is even worse. You know, it's completely messing up. What we ought to be doing is if it doesn't find it, get out of the program. And what do I mean by that? Well, what does CQ return if it looks for a quote and it doesn't find it? If .find does not find the quote, it returns a -1. So we could use that to our advantage. Down here, when we're going to get the file name, we could do this. If opening quote greater than or equal to 0 and close quote greater than or equal to 0, then do those two things. Else, be sure to untab the else, print no data found. Okay, now since I don't have my quotes in there, it's saying no data found. I need to come back in. I'm going to put one of them in. I'm leaving the other one off. I run it. It still says no data found because it only found one quote, not two. So now I'm going to add the second quote. We have valid data again. And it doesn't matter how it's spaced out as long. You know, whatever. Now it should work again. Now these intermediate print strings, if we were giving software to the customer, we wouldn't want those. We should at least give more information, you know. Close, quote, found at, you know, like that. And this one should say open, quote, found at. We just got to give some additional information for our own sake, if nothing else. Open quote found at 19, close quote found at 32. Now you all have picked a password and had the website tell you that it's not a valid password because it didn't contain enough uppercase letters or did not contain a number or a special symbol or something like that. So we're going to write a program that gets us in the direction of doing that. Let's make a password field. And let's just make up a password. I don't know. Rose and then state with a $sign. And then the number 5. Just to make it look like it's a good password. Let's step through that thing letter by letter, checking to see what kind of data each one of those are. So let's write a while loop. We need a counter. I think I'm just going to call the counter X, or I, for index. I'm going to start at 0 because that's the first position. And then while I is less than the length of the string, less than the length of the password, I want to get that character out. I'm going to call it CH. CH is equal to the slice of the string at that position, password at that position. And then let's print that out. Just baby steps. Make sure that we can process it character by character. And what did I do wrong? Classic Professor Thompson mistake.
All the R's.
Yeah, why is it all R's? What did I do wrong with my loop?
I is equal to 0, so it starts at like the 0 part of the...
And then I wanted I to equal 1, and then I want I to equal to 2. So I plus equals 1. Now to be better. Okay. I didn't do that on purpose, but I tend to make that mistake a lot when I write while loops.
That you did. And you're like, oh.
Okay, now we need to see if a letter is uppercase or if it's a digit. If ch dot is digit, colon, print, it's a number. If ch dot is alpha, print, it's a letter. I bet there's an is upper and an is lower. Let's try those. If ch dot is upper, print uppercase. If ch dot is lower, print lowercase. And if it's not a digit and it's not an alpha, it's probably a special character. So there's one more we can use, which is called alnum, which stands for alphanumeric. So if not ch dot is alnum, if it's not an alphanumeric character, it's a special character, like a $sign. Now, I may have made a mistake here, but I'm going to run it and see. Okay, so well, I misspelled alnum. I made it anum. It's alnum. I-S-A-L-N-U-M. All right, so it ran through and it decided that R was an uppercase letter, O was a lowercase letter, and so on, that the $sign was a special character, and that 5 was a number. It's all good except we don't want spaces. We don't want spaces. Period. So let's add one last thing. We can just check to see if CH is equal to a space. If CH is equal to a space, we're going to print it's a space. I don't have any spaces in my data. I'm going to go and add a space between rows and state just because I want to see that one too. Okay. Now great. This shows us that we have all the tools we need in order to process that password and make sure it's valid. But really just displaying it's a number, it's a letter, uppercase, lowercase. If you were creating a password for, Facebook or whatever, you wouldn't want it to show all those messages. You just want it, actually what you'd want it to do is not argue with you. But as a developer, you want to make sure it's a valid password. So we need to count these things. We need a count. We need a count for the number of letters, for the number of uppercase letters, for the number of lowercase letters, for the number of special characters, and for the number of spaces. So we need a whole bunch of counters. We're going to define some counters. And the reason we're going to define them is because if we don't define them above the while loop, they won't be available to us outside the while loop. So maybe digits is equal to 0. Letters is equal to 0. Uppers is equal to 0. Lowers is equal to 0. Specials is equal to 0. And spaces is equal to 0. So, if I find a number, I want to increase the number of numbers. Digits plus equals 1. If it's a letter, I want to increase the number of letters. So I increment the letters counter by 1. And the same for uppercase and lowercase and special characters. I need to do the rest of those as well. So if we find an uppercase letter, uppers plus equals 1. If we find a lowercase letter, lowers plus equals 1. If we found an alphanumeric character, or if it's not an alphanumeric character, that means it's a special. So specials plus equals to 1. And then if we find a space, spaces plus equals 1. Then let's print those values. We have 6 counters. I'm getting to the point where I'm wanting to remove these print messages so that I can get more space on the screen. So I'm going to delete that print, it's a number. I'm going to delete that print, it's a letter. I'm going to delete print uppercase, print lowercase, special characters, and it's a space. And the only reason I'm really doing that is so that this is cleaner. Whoops, I deleted the wrong thing. There, print, it's a space. And so I could print out my counters. Print digits found, comma, digits, or just digits equals. Print letters equals. Print uppers equals. Same for lowers and specials and spaces. Now if it runs for you and it displays a number of digits and the letters and the uppers and the lowers, you have enough information now to make up your rules about what a good password has to be. I guess the only thing missing is the length of the password. Quite often they say it has to have a length of 8 or greater. So, I'm going to wander around and make sure people don't have typos. But if you're up to this point and it's actually working, add some if statements that kind of do this. Our rules are going to be, add an if statement that does if the number of digits is equal to 0, print password must have digits, or at least 1 digit. This is not correct syntax, I just want you to add that. And then if the length of the password is less than 8, print password must be 8 or more characters. Get it to do that. That's just a good start. And like I said, this isn't proper syntax, but you know how to do proper syntax. You type the if statement, you put the colon, and you put the print statement on the next line.
Fix it.
Any mystery syntax typos? Yeah, it's got that garbage up at the top. Well, it's garbage now, you know. Okay. Actually, it's looking for the apostrophe, so it doesn't find the apostrophe. Okay. All right, I need to get caught up and do those 2 red comments. So if digits is equal to 0, colon, print password must have at least 1 digit. Now these are all going to be error conditions, and if it has no error conditions, then it's okay. So I think what I'm going to do is just structure these as if-else ifs. If digits is equal to, and I didn't put that in my rules, so it's not like you should have known to do that, but if the length of the password, really that ought to be the first thing we check, is less than 8, print password must be 8 or more characters. And then we're going to put a final else, which is print password is valid. Now really we're going to add more conditions to it, but we're just sticking that there as a, you know, that's going to always be the last thing in our series of if statements. And so we're going to say valid is equal to true with a capital T. The reason I'm doing that is I'm going to make a while loop that has all of this in it so that we can ask them for the password, and if it's valid, great, we're done. But if it's not valid, then we want to ask them again. So I'm going to have to tab all of this stuff. Starting at the bottom, I'm going to hold the shift key down and use the up cursor to go all the way up here to this place where it says password is equal to, and I'm going to tab that over. The reason I'm doing that is because this is going to be part of a while loop now. So valid is equal to false. I need some flag, and I need to continue to run while not valid. I don't want to use the same password each time. I want to ask the user for the password. So input, well, password is equal to, let's use a print statement above that. Print, please enter a password. And then password is equal to input. Do we need to convert it to an int or a float this time? No, because we like it being a string.
I think your false is capital F.
You're right. False has to be capital F. Oh, my error. As soon as I asked for the input, I reassigned it to that row state 5 thing. So I need to delete that line. Please enter a password. Test. Password must have at least 1 digit. Please enter a password. Test, test 1. Password is valid. That's because those are the only rules we have in there right now. I want you to get that far. I'm going to wander around again and make sure you get that far. But for the rest of the class, and we're going to call this a homework assignment, but as soon as you get it done, you can bail. I want you to implement the following rules. Make your code check for these things. Length must be greater than equal to A. Number of digits has to be 1 or greater. Specials has to be 1 or more. Spaces cannot be greater than 0. These are our rules. It has to have at least 1 uppercase letter. So uppers has to be greater than 0. Lowers has to be greater than 0. I think that would cover it. So these are our rules. That one, that one, that one, that one. So it can't have any spaces. It must have at least 1 uppercase letter and 1 lowercase letter. So you're going to have to swap your logic. You're not going to say if uppers is greater than 0. You're going to say if uppers is equal to 0, print an error message. If lowers is equal to 0, print an error message. And where do you put all that stuff? You put it down here before this final else. So you're going to need more elifs. This is the last thing that's going to be in your program unless you want to put a final print, done at the end of it. So here's where the rest of the rules go. So upload to class 15 and homework 8.